It's time now for our international press review, and for that I'm joined once again in the studio by Erin Ogunkoye. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Axie.
Now that aerial drone strike that killed 3 US soldiers in Jordan, stoking fears of a much wider conflict in the Middle East. What are the papers saying today, Erin?
Well, the papers really have quite a forceful response in general, Axie, to that attack. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board argues that Biden's, quote, weak response to these attacks puts his presidency at risk. The paper even saying that the deaths of those 3 American soldiers are simply a consequence of his response to 150 recent Iranian proxy attacks on U.S. forces in the Middle East. That response being simply rhetorical displeasure or limited airstrikes. The irony of that, the piece argues, is that this more restrained strategy will mean that now he'll have to strike back harder than if he had responded with devastating force the first time. Now, a piece in the Washington Post today argues that though the Biden administration should avoid bombing Iran unless there's further provocation, it does need to do more than it has been, similar to what the Wall Street Journal said. The editorialist saying that Biden should take a page from the Trump administration's book, notably when it used a drone strike to kill Qasem Soleimani. The piece saying that the U.S. should target Quds Force personnel then in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, or Lebanon, and this beginning with Soleimani's successor.
Other papers, though, Erin, recognising that a much harsher response could have significantly more dangerous impact in the region.
Yeah, that's right, Axie. For The Economist, it says that Tehran could up the ante elsewhere, notably through Hezbollah and Lebanon. It adds that outright conflict with Iran also guarantees a surge in the price of oil. This is bad for consumers worldwide. It's even worse in an election year, which is the case in the United States, the piece argues. And then finally, of course, it says that this could all jeopardize efforts to negotiate a pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas, which, of course, so many civilians desperately depend on now.
Meanwhile, Erin, if we turn to France, farmers' protests are expected to spread to the French capital this Monday afternoon.
That's right, Axie. It's been dubbed Operation Paris Encircled. 2 major agricultural unions going so far as to vow a siege on the capital from this afternoon on. They say that similar actions in France's bigger cities like Bordeaux, Lyon, Marseille, Toulouse could also be planned in the coming days. And this is because they're not at all satisfied by the announcements that Prime Minister Gabriel Attal has made thus far since the start of the protests several days ago. Libération, though, wonders whether or not this is a good move on the part of the farmers. They say that in blocking roads to the capital, they will first and foremost hurt regular average French citizens who, for now, overwhelmingly support their movement. They say it will affect people like regular working people, artisans, small businesses, and children just trying to get to school. And then finally, La Croix today, which also headlines on these protests, says that the key to understanding these farmers' anger isn't to be found in Paris, but instead in Brussels. It says that, indeed, farmers in some 16 countries have been protesting over the past year and a half or so. Now, that's because of the EU's common agricultural policy, which the piece reminds us now combines new regulations that are aimed at protecting the environment and a reduction in the direct aid for farmers, which are the real sources of the anger. La Croix says that the bloc has launched a strategic dialogue in order to try and soften the growing opposition that we've seen between environmentalism, protecting the environment, and agriculture. But the deciding factor of how this all plays out will surely be during the European elections set for June.
Well, hopping next door now to Italy, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni expected to outline her expectations, her plan for Africa this Monday.
Yeah, that's right. She is hosting that international summit on Africa in Rome, which some 25 African leaders will attend. Now, her idea is to invest in things like development, education, infrastructure, and energy in order to address factors like unemployment and poverty that are pushing people to leave the African continent. Critics, though, are rather skeptical of her plan for several reasons, one of them being the amount of investment pledged for now isn't particularly significant. Many of the guests in attendance are not exactly continent heavyweights. And of course, perhaps above all, the optics of this type of plan. Meloni will need to avoid appearing predatory or patronizing, which is not easy to do, especially given her government's rhetoric about migrants thus far. And I'd just like to connect this to a recent piece in The Economist, interestingly, which takes a look at Meloni's governance in general. The British magazine actually saying that fears about her neo-fascism ended up being overblown. They say that her social policy hasn't changed much, despite her party's harsh rhetoric on things like abortion and gay civil unions. She has not teamed up with other populist leaders in the EU to undermine the bloc's legitimacy, and it adds that fears of xenophobia have proven unfounded, even though there's been a sharp rise in the number of asylum seekers arriving to Italian territory by boat. This piece in the Economist ultimately arguing that she shows that the so-called far right in Europe, I quote, can turn out in office to behave like run-of-the-mill conservatives.
And Erin, you're finishing with some revelations about the benefits of music.
It's always a good time for a reminder about the importance of music, Haxie. Now, according to a new study by researchers in the UK, simply listening to music doesn't necessarily do much for cognitive health, which I'll admit I was surprised to read, but playing a musical instrument does, especially later in life. The piano or the keyboard are apparently the most beneficial, with brass and woodwind instruments showing some advantages as well. On top of that, people who read music regularly were shown to have better numerical memory. So this is perhaps actually some encouragement to pick up a new hobby, knowing that it could indeed it does keep your brain active and thereby certainly helps you to age better.
No hope for me, I'm afraid, on that front, as I think you know. Erin Ogunkeye of the Looks for the Day's your press stories in the international press today. Thank you very much. So that's all we have time for right now. Stay tuned, more news coming up in just a few minutes' time.